Today we're going to talk about John Ogbu, who was a professor at Berkeley. He passed away not too long ago. He was originally from Africa. He was an outstanding scholar. Did this interesting study. There are some folks that make a critique of his work. Nevertheless, I find his work very relevant. He is a reference. We should look at it, the way he understands, social culture studies and things like that. But mainly from this angle that some countries that colonize other countries, somehow in the colonizing country, people make up ideas about the colonized country. And so when some people from the colonized country goes to live in the colonizer country, some people already have made up ideas about the folks on that country. And that goes from, for a lot of countries, for a lot of different cultures in Europe and US. One interesting study came from England when England colonized India for 150 years, I think, right? Until Gandhi stood up and created a movement, peaceful movement, right? And so, as far as we know, people that went from India to live in England, they did very poorly. But Indians from India that come to live in the US or other countries, they thrive and they do very well. Here in the US, many are experts on computers, mathematics, or programming computers and stuff, and advance in so many ways. They succeed and do well. And so when Ogbu talked about this, he divided several groups, ethnic groups, especially here in the US, who he considers voluntary immigrants that chose to be here, as opposed in contrast to involuntary immigrants. So his theory goes like this, that it provides educators with understanding of social cultural dynamics affecting minority children and their schooling experience between these two groups, voluntary or involuntary. So it also indicates the central issues responsible for involuntary minorities, students' school failure. And a lot of it has to do with the mistrust with the school system, and mixed feelings about it, oppositional identity about how schools use a curriculum or textbooks and how they see some of these children. And many of these minority groups, especially non-whites, feel that there is this pressure to act white. In fact, historically speaking, in the US, there were programs of Americanization programs in the past. Some of you are familiar with. And so boarding schools for Mexican Americans, and also segregation programs and things like that. So Ogbu talk about how this mistrust builds up and why these types of instructions succeed with involuntary minorities while other types don't. So it provides criteria for evaluating the potential for educational success. And the article, main arguments also suggest instructional strategy to deal with mistrust, oppositional identity, and peer pressure not to act right. And other scholars we're going to look it over here in this course. The articles from Signita Forderhan on racelessness in advance. We're going to come back to some of these and look at how African Americans also are affected. But one of the things I'd like to ask you to take notes is this particular statement that I put in there, which is one of my theses that I'd like to defend it in this course. That is structures, not coincidence, push some people ahead and keep some people behind. So there are forces that affected the schooling experiences of children. And without putting attention to how the school community feels about school, it's very hard sometimes to be successful. So we have to understand why parents have mixed feelings about schools, right? And I always defended this idea in my classes because a lot of teachers I've been in touch with, they have a tendency to blame parents. Oh yeah, if parents just would help more in school and homework, yeah, I would be more successful. Sure, yeah. But we have to think about it. If a lot of these children that are pushed to go through standardization programs and they hate school and many drop out, why and how would this population, after they are adults and have their own children, they have to bring it by force, by law, their own children to school? Do you think they have good memories about school? No. And they don't have good feelings about it either. So Ogbu defended this idea that if you want to be successful with children in schools, you also have to enlist parent support and earn their trust. And so, hopefully you took notes of that. But the classification of minorities into voluntary and involuntary goes as far as the nature of white American involvement with their becoming minorities. How whiteness and white majority had to place these other groups into different categories. The reasons why they became and were brought to the United States and things like that. So here are some of the voluntary groups. Refugees, migrant guest workers that cross the borders to work here legally. Undocumented workers, they also cross the border in a difficult way. Binationals, that people that are citizens of more than one country, migrate or immigrate. I'm actually, myself, I have dual citizenship. And involuntary minorities, non-immigrant, people have been conquered in some way or colonized or enslaved. You see how I put the word rather than say slaved? I say enslaved because it was not a natural historical event. It was created by white folks that thought they could make money at the back of other people's work, don't pay them anything, So it started with the Portuguese colonizers that uprooted people from Africa and put them in that condition. So the European colonizers used that idea, because they thought indigenous people were not doing the cheap work for them, and so they used the African labor, and that's what we call diaspora. The word is important for graduate students. How some people had been uprooted from their cultural and country context, and they put it in another condition, right? So here you have the American Indians or Native Americans, Alaska natives, In Canada, they call it First Nation people, so I like to put those words up there for you to think about it. Original owners of the land who were conquered, Mexican Americans, you know, the Southwest at one time belonged to Mexico, right? Texas, Arizona, Americans, so on. So children of immigrant minorities are voluntary minorities, like their foreign-born parents, second, third, fourth generation US-born Chinese. They help in the railroad in California and other places. They've been treated as semi-slaves as well. And people forget to hear in the US the history of Asians' contribution to this country as well. Latinos, African American, indigenous, Asians, and so on. Right? Everybody that belongs to this country, works hard, will succeed. This negative comparison also is true for minority, middle-class groups, because discrimination against them has existed for many years, and people tend to believe that it appears to be permanent. They tended to be more critical of school curriculum and have these mistrust feelings about schools and teachers and so on. So these orally transmitted ideas about schools and feelings, you know, on how to make it in the US, you know, how to succeed it. For example, for some, will be concerned with the language problem will eventually surpass any sort of discrimination. They don't think it's structure that you know, has a major imprinted on that. Something that can be overcome. So involuntary minorities have an unconscious ambivalence about this idea of succeeding in the US. They believe that hard work and education are necessary to succeed in the US, but on the other hand, they face unemployment and you know, and some sort of wage discrimination, and they feel like these barriers are controlled by white folks in the economy and politics, and many generations that come to their identity. So professionals among involuntary minorities have a few ties to the community and are not visible in it. Athletes and entertainers are admired, but often these are people who did not use education, but talent and physical strength as a way to succeed. So trust in white institutions, pragmatic trust. Immigrants have an optimistic, practical attitude when they arrive. Some immigrants, like Koreans in Los Angeles, Afro-Caribbeans in New York, like Puerto Ricans, Dominican Republic, and so on, establish their own schools to supplement their own children's education, where they feel that the schooling experience is inadequate, you know, the one they have children go through. And so, I have seen a movie done with children from Puerto Rico. Sorry, I can't remember the name of the movie, but if any of you remember, let me know. That Puerto Rican children were going to public schools in New York, and they were doing terribly bad. And so some of these folks decided to have their own schools outside the public schools, where they danced salsa and they had their culture going there, and these kids came out alive. You know, suddenly they developed confidence, self-esteem, and pride on who they are and where they come from, when in reality the public schools really don't care about their identity, background, and so on. So just to give you an idea, but we'll talk more after this presentation, their long history of discrimination, racism, conflict leads many of them to distrust schools that perhaps being controlled by white folks. So schools are treated with suspicion because minorities justification believe that public schools will not educate their children like they would educate white children, because their identities were developed in response to discrimination and racism. These minorities are not anxious to give up their sense of identity because the oppressors require them to do so. Oppositional identity then comes with this idea of resisting schooling. So a lot of children go to school and they feel like they cannot be themselves, and they start developing identity crisis. We're going to read it down the road. Jim Cummings, that says that many of these children become ambivalent about schooling, that they're not from here, they're not from there, and they end up resisting schooling. So no matter how good you are as a teacher, if we're doing this to them, they perceive that they cannot be themselves. So the requirement for school success, which involve mastering school curriculum and exhibit school behavior, which a lot of it is silencing, are interpreted as white society requirements that deprive them from their identity. So teaching standard English in school may be interpreted as a mechanism of language assimilation, conforming to the requirements of white, acting white, right? And there is a lot of that in the way people talk about themselves, right? And you can see that when you go into, for example, a Latino community. Some people say, you're becoming a coconut. Have you heard about those? Or if you go in an African American community, they say, you are an Oreo cookie, right? It's like you are black on outside and white inside. And then, have you heard the banana phenomenon? It's like you are yellow outside and white inside. And these things people play and joke around. I say it here, but with the respect, because as a scholar, we have to deconstruct the narratives, how people talk about their experiences, and start to developing a better understanding of why people do things like that. So these beliefs create two dilemmas for folks that didn't choose to be here or didn't choose to be put it in this category of minority. They make students feel that they have to choose between either conforming to the demands and rewards of certain the structure presented to them and white act white, or community interpretations disapproval or ambivalence towards attitudes or behaviors, or the beliefs make students feel that they must choose between an instructional interpretation of schooling as a route for future employment and moving up in society, or be suspicious a community that school curriculum is something designed to displace them of their identity. So schools say to these students, hey, you must come to school, master the school culture, to succeed in mainstream America. Since the mainstream is essentially white, this means you must give up many particulars of being black, Latino, Asian, so on, styles of speech and so on, right? Because many African Americans also use Ebonics, just like Latinos speak Spanish in schools and things like that. And if teachers reprimand and repress that, that's one way of interpreting that they cannot be themselves, right? Ebonics is not necessarily broken English. I respect Ebonics as a way of this community trying to develop a sense of affirmation, affirming being who they are. And so good teachers will learn how to work with it in a way that to respect the students, how they talk and so on. The teacher could say, well, I understand what you're saying, but maybe there'll be other places to say that, and how you want to learn mainstream dominant language in order to succeed, right? Involuntary minorities see the curriculum as an attempt to impose white culture on them. This leads them to question the curriculum, and so on. We already talked about that. So they wanted their children to talk proper. The double message that involuntary minority parents and communities send it to their children is do well in schools, but be careful with teachers, school officials, because they are part of the white institutions. You cannot trust them. If parents have that feeling, it means a lot. We have to do a lot of work, how to embrace their support, right? So how do you understand that? So the ambivalence is that, on one hand, the parents want their children to get good education, but this attitude behavior contradict their verbal assertions. The mixed feelings lead to reduce effort, which manifests themselves in failure to pay attention in class, homework, keep up with the school assignments, and claims that work is uninteresting or boring and things like that, right? There'll be other readings down the road, so this is just the beginning of critical race theory, so hold on to your seats, because we're going to go on a ride, and a wild ride, and then we're going to go deeper, the second part of the class today with American apartheid, right? Apartheid. Some students are openly defiant as they challenge the teacher's authority. They do not put much effort into learning, and they see us separating them from their peers and families, and they struggle with that. So standard English is perceived as a way of acting right. And so by explaining the nature of the problem, it leads to some educational strategy for helping to improve learning. The theory does not posit explicit or implicit that group membership alone determines school success or failure. So what the categories does is to help educators think about the differences that exist between groups, not among individuals. That's very important, right? Are you all paying attention? Teachers should avoid basing expectations about an individual's school performance and behavior on group membership. Try to generalize, everybody's like that. Students should be treated as individuals. As a result, the long history of racism and so on, many people feel reluctant to cross cultural boundaries and adopt this other persona. So the net result is an ambivalence about the uselessness of school as a vehicle to success in life. What teachers can do. I'm going to ask everybody to take notes of this, because I glanced through a lot of the arguments and explanations, which we're going to go through a lot of the readings, but then many of my teachers say, what do we do, teachers? What do we do, teacher or professor? So here are some ideas to build trust, right? So how you do that? And evidently, John Ogbu just showed the initial of what we can do. There will be other readings, other authors that talk in more details, and how we can expand this. And towards the end of the semester, when you're going to look at the book, Anti-Racism Education, you're going to get many more ideas about it. So students will trust teachers when they believe that teachers has the students' best interests at heart. That you are really committed to their struggle, that you understand where they're coming from, that you're for real. If teachers are not able to practice what they preach, the students can see through it. And so they know that you're just paying a lip service, and then they end up not trusting you for the teaching, right? So the student's identity and self-esteem will not be harmed. Teachers needed to show students by word and action, that they believe in that their culture is valuable, culturally responsive learning, culturally responsive curriculum. And another way of saying that is affirmation of identity, things like that. So if learning does not reflect the culture that people come from, or the culture, the people you're working with, more likely it's just going to go above their heads. Students need to feel that there is somebody in schools that match their skin colors. Students need to feel that the books and the role models placed in front of them match their skin color and their culture and struggles. Language, learning styles, curriculum. For Black Americans, for example, students ought to be the difference, of Ebonics and dialectics and standard English, and where would be the most appropriate places to use one language and the other. So they are not necessarily bashed, oh, broken English, right? No. How you can convert something that apparently at teacher's eyes, is downplayed, how can you turn that into a positive thing, right? So it requires teachers understand the students' culture, language, and struggle, history, folklore, and everything. And communicate to the students that the teacher is interested in their world and their context, which serve them to validate their identity. Explicit deal with oppositional ambivalence. When these students, they are resisting schools, they don't want to engage, and they feel, this resistance behavior, it is important to raise the issue if students are conscious or not. So bring it up, because it will help students to think openly about their behaviors and reading, writing. Teachers needed to find ways to help students see that they can be successful in schools and keep their cultural identity. Role models, role models that really show people that understand the different backgrounds. Who could be a good role model for African Americans? Barack Obama would be one. Is Michael Jackson a good role model? Or
No.
Michael Jordan?
Well, Oprah Winfrey is good. She's a philanthropist. She came from a oppressive situation.
Do you think Oprah Winfrey is a good role model?
I do.
Yeah, I have my doubts about that. But I don't want to say in camera, so... but let me say, who could be a good role model for African Americans?
Past or present?
Present or past, anyway.
Douglas Adams.
Beyonce.
I don't know. I mean, I think anybody.
Come on, who are the most Condoleezza Rice?
You don't really like her, but she could be.
Sorry, the camera's catching
Wrong party.
I don't know.
Who could be good role models for African Americans? They are the traditional ones.
The family. The rappers, what the kids speak, or what it should be.
What it should be.
This is catching camera. How about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks? He could be present too, who could be good, you send a few ones. Okay, Latinos, who could be good role models for Latinos, past and present? Cesar Chavez, I could start. Dolores Huerta.
Corky Gonzalez.
Corky Gonzalez,
Pat Mora.
How about J-Lo?
No.
At least you agree on that one. Yeah, there are so many that succeed, but they sell out in order to succeed, right? So you want the role models that are able to understand the struggle of that particular ethnic group and retain their sense of pride being that and move forward, right? Then after we finish this, we talk about other things, okay? So students to mentoring programs are ways of members of their own groups who are academically and professionally successful and who retain their sense of identity and pride, right? Some people lower the standards, you know, and this is why some students complain, oh, a lot of reading in this class, a lot of work. Well, should I hold you to high standards like other universities would hold their students to, right? So I do not lower my standards because, oh yeah, pobrecitos, you know, here. No. Everybody can do it right there. So by expecting clear, stated, high standards, the teachers will build trust by conveying the message that they don't share racist stereotypes about inferior intellectual abilities of any minority groups they work with. Is that clear? I think this is key, right? Parents' community involvement. You can be a great teacher, but you can be more successful when you enlist parent support, right? So how you bring the parents to your side. You may have to do home visits. Some principals don't approve that, but I believe in home visits, and I believe in getting out of your way to reach out for parents. So teachers will need to work hard to enlist parent support. They needed to show parents that they are respected, that you respect the parents and need their help their children succeed in schools. Personal, individual contacts can help overcome group and institutional stereotypes. One of my best friends is a school teacher in Los Angeles. She got Teacher of the Year award. She's an outstanding teacher. And one day she had an African American mother that she invited several times and call and nag and ask this mother to come, and she wouldn't come to school until one day they actually met. And the first thing she said to the mother was this: your daughter is outstanding on this and that. She's doing great on this and that. And these are some areas she still needs to work on. And the mother cried because she said, well, all the teachers I met before, they all want to meet with me to tell how bad my students are and what they're doing wrong or not doing right. And so the importance of saying something that students are doing well and positive first above anything else, right? Teachers need to find ways to make their contacts with parents positive by notifying them about their children's success rather than limiting to informing about the problems. I already talked about that. Teachers need to find ways to reduce pressure by providing opportunities to openly discuss them and to help students develop ways of dealing with these pressures. Okay, this is it. I call McCarthyism article, but it's social justice in times of McCarthyism renaissance. The word social justice got in there because these guys invited me to publish a book about social justice, so I put it as part of the title to make sure it fits in the book. But remember when George Bush passed that Patriot Act? Apparently had 3,000 pages, and it was given to the senators overnight. They didn't read it. The next day they approved it without reading it, and now we have to live with it. People can listen to your phone calls, get into your emails. And, there is a word, you may want to write it down. It's called data balance. Like there is a word surveillance. Now there is a new word. This is a breaking edge thing, just came out very recently. It's called data valence. You know how you spend on your credit card? people build up an idea, a profile about you, or wherever you spend on credit card, they know what you like, right? So then they try to sell you stuff based on the data they have about you. Well, data valence now is anything you click on internet, they have an idea about you. They build a profile about you. If you click that, it's because you approve that, you're interested in that. So that says something about you. And they're building a data profiling us because you know that there is the Patriot Act, surveillance, what you read, what kind of books you check out of the library. It's checked on your record. What kind of movies you rent to watch, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll enter the data. And so for us working here in the border, now that you asked about the border, right? This is a study done on the border, even though not necessarily about race, but the surveillance done here in Mexico. So I started seeing all these lights pointing to Mexico, and all these poor houses, sometimes the lights penetrate, excuse my patriarchal language there, the housing of people that live on the outside with those lights, and all these cameras. Now cameras being put it on the traffic lights without asking our permission. I was in California when they tried to put these cameras on the traffic lights, and people voted against it. But here in El Paso, we're not asked to vote it. They just put it. Well, for me, it's an imposition. And then we're surveilled, right? And I got one of those tickets, so I didn't publish because I got a ticket after I published this. But, and then they want to put cameras on classrooms too, right? And so the surveillance, I think it takes away our ability of being spontaneous and be creative and try to do something different. It's not good for humans to feel like they're being watched, right? Or somebody's watching you. And this, we become self-conscious, And so I don't think it's healthy, And I think we have to point it out, exposed, and try to change things, right? And I'm sure you're going to hear things about the opposite theory, but in terms of this article, I look from this angle, that is an attempt to silence intellectuals, an attempt to say either you're with us or you're against us. And that's very authoritarian ways of governing, and Bush got this close of killing the beautiful democratic spirit of this country. That, by the way, started with John Dewey. If you read John Dewey, talk about what is democracy, right? Government of the people, for the people, and with the people, right? And so people forget or good principles of what a democracy is. But in particular, this particular publication aims to examine how an oppressed group, and supposedly the Al-Qaeda, right? They exploded the building in New York and did all these other horrifying things. If they had some claim, because why they did that? People never went to that. Very few people, I noticed, that studied this, so why they did it, And so people want to push into religious fanatics and stuff to push Americans against this religious denomination, Islamic, that's growing tremendously. If Americans would do that, it would be the end of the U.S., because then you have a religious war, right? But it was not necessarily a religious group, but U.S. used Afghanistan to resist against Russia, and promise after thing was done that they're going to clean house, they're going to do all these things for the country, rebuild and so on. U.S. just closed the door and run away from it, forgot it. People there resented because there was a lot of radiation left in different spaces. More than, I think, 5,000 children were born with defects, and People have deep resentments and other things I'm not going to say on camera, but you know, the fact that some of these folks chose to get arms and bomb a building, they lost the sympathy if they had a good claim, because people shift sympathy to the victims of the horrifying atrocity of New York, right? The whole world is, oh my God, look at, you know, and we bound to it. I remember I was just stepping into UTEP, arriving here. I was considering buying a house in Mexico. I thought it was cool to have this transnational experience. And then the line was like 2, 3, or 4 hours on the line. I said, no way. But so the sympathy shift. The oppressed may lose any valid claim they might have by using strategies that oppressor uses, you know, to defend themselves. So, and this is very short. Surveillance, hegemonic surveillance versus self-surveillance. You know that. You know, so this in this Patriot Act, then one thing is to have the system surveilling us. The other thing is for us to self-surveil each other. Oh yeah, maybe you're not a good patriot. Yeah, maybe you know you're anti-American, right? And people have it as a, why don't you go back where you came from? You know, and people start saying they feel like they've been legitimized to say things that are offensive or problematic, right? And a lot of the patriotism, this I'm going to dare say in camera, a lot of patriotism in the U.S. is pathological. If you look up Tim Wise, you'll say that, you know, all this, God bless America, you know, we're the number one and all of that. I think it's problematic, you know, because if you say that God bless America, you also have to say God bless America and never in each country in the world without exception, right? Otherwise, you're asking God to play favorites to you, to this country, right? And I think, if I understand correctly, you know, God, people pray to God for different intentions, but just think about it, you know, how God would interpret the different prayers. I guess the sun and the rain and whatever, it shines to everybody, right? And I think people have the build ideas about it. But so it is problematic when we start reproducing the surveillance on each other, keep each other, tab on each other and stuff. Then we bought it into the game, right? We become institutionalized, indoctrinated to see life from that angle. Then Obama won the election. Thank God the things with that red and blue and yellow. Remember the red and now a very big chance of terror attack right now. Worry and all that fear building culture is devastating because then people don't think clearly. You know, we act out of fear, and people do things that are not necessarily wise. But on the other hand, I see this as an attempt to silence intellectual, you know, with this idea of the Patriot Act, you know. Oh yeah, if you dare to speak against it, then you may be one of them, right? And, you know, I think it then is the end of academic freedom, right? This is the way I chose to work in this public university, and I only want to work to public institutions because the material I cover, private institution will not perhaps entertain me there for too long, you know. And I would not dare to sell their ideology either, because I like free thinking, I like academic freedom to look at the research and say things that people don't like to hear. And good intellectuals have that duty. Otherwise, we start doing research for private interests, for corporate interests, and that's the end of knowledge and wisdom. And so, and I take this to another level in doctoral classes, where research should be based on public interests, right? How can we make this world a better world to live in and things like that, right? So we have to protect our rights, you know, as intellectuals, as free thinkers, and students' voice, and teachers' voice, and all that, right? If you start using repressive means to control people, then, you know, we lose a lot of our freedom, right? So border surveillance is a symbol of who the U.S. wants to keep in and who they keep it out, right? Why there is so much of this craziness that becomes pathological about surveilling the Mexico-U.S. border, when Canada-U.S. is also another big border, right? People are not concerned much about white immigrants. In fact, Europeans don't even need a visa to come to U.S. Majority of people that came and live and is living illegally in the U.S. came legally to U.S., right? And so who are the ones we don't want it in the U.S., right? And usually are people of color, you know, and poor folks, right? But historically, humanity had migrated from country to country because of poverty wars and things like that, family reunification. And right now, as we speak, there are thousands of people moving from Africa to North Africa and different countries, Asia. The whole world is in movement due to necessities and things like that. So U.S.-Mexico border versus U.S. border, Canada, we have to rethink, right? Of how we see immigration and things like that, you know. And a lot of money is spent on surveilling the border, money that could be used for a more purposeful goal, which is to create jobs. You know, people would not engage into drugs or you know, do any crime if they have an opportunity, right? Generally speaking, right? Because we always know that some people, no matter how good it is, there are people that engage in crime, right? But anyhow, just to think about this particular article and from this angle, and I think that's all I have to say. As I don't know the authors very well, Massey and Denton, but I will pass the book around and take a look. And so, this particular reading really digs us deeper into critical race theories. If any of you have not been exposed to it, so hold on to your seats and try carefully to digest this, you know, before making any assumptions, right? Because it's all based on studies, and we try to do justice to the scholars that develop these studies. In the last 10 years, U.S. had made a major advancement in terms of critical race theory. When we talk about racism, people think it's a thing of the past. Oh, we had the civil rights movement, and we even have a black president. You know what I'm talking about, right? But the thing is that we are more segregated now than we are years before civil rights movement. So, one thing that I like to pose to you is think about the racial contract. How some ethnic groups make it big in the U.S. What kind of jobs did they make it? For example, Latinos. How Latinos make it successful in the U.S.? What kind of things they usually do?
Landscaping.
What?
Landscaping.
Landscaping. Construction. Huh?
Boxing, trade,
Boxing.
electrician.
Electrician.
Yeah.
There's more stuff. Restaurants. Mexican food. You know that salsa mexicana had the bypass ketchup. Ketchup was the most sold sauce in the U.S. Now salsa mexicana bypassed it. So just think about it. What else? How do you see Mexicans or Latinos in general making it big in the U.S.?
Entertainment,
Entertainment,
actors, singers,
Comedians.
sports.
music,
Music.
Yeah.
athletics. As well. Now African Americans. How African Americans make it big in the U.S.? Very successful. Huh? Entertainment. Athletes. We run out of ideas. Fingers in my hand.
Musicians. They
Musicians,
rap.
yes.
Musicians.
But again, they are, I mean, it's basically the same as the Latinos, minus the restaurants.
Yeah. So that's what we call social contract. And there are a lot of books written. I think one is Michael Miller, Charles Mills, that talk about the racial contract. You have to look it up. I can't remember the name exactly, but how Latinos and blacks make successful in the U.S. and other ethnic groups, we can talk about it too, right? Let's say social, historical, empirical work, main arguments is that cities are more segregated now than they were years back. Now you go to some cities and you know this is the black communities, the Latino communities, the white communities, the Asian communities, and so on, right? So apparently before civil rights movement we had less of that. People live racially apart more now than before. And it was constructed this way by structures that I said earlier in the class. Remember? Structures, not coincidence. And some people ahead and keep some people behind. Here are some evidence of that thesis that I said I was going to defend in this class. That government and businesses develop policies and politics and distribution of resources that built it places in this way. So, and then, if you grow up in a community that's poor, that's run down, the sense of self-esteem and the sense of place that comes, out of the place you live in, it leaves a deep impression or imprinted in your mind, on the child's mind, where they grow up, as opposed to grow up in a very poor, murky, depressing environment, as opposed to being born in a healthy, beautiful, green neighborhood. Isn't that different? It really affected spirits, right? So government funded whites and excluded blacks. Many suburbs were built out of racist and not fair deals. So there is a need to deconstruct the idea that people of color are lazy. It's not necessarily true. Blacks are very hard-working people. Latinos are very hard-working people. And so, but if people grow up in a neighborhood that's depressing, sad, and there's not many opportunity or jobs, and stigma that comes out of place. If I say that a student graduate from La Bowie, La Jeff, or Franklin, or Coronado, don't we have ideas about it? El Paso High, right? We have ideas about who is in there, right? How is that community and what kind of education they go through. Now you study, which university you study, right? UTEP or Texas A&M or UCLA, Yale, Harvard, MIT. We have ideas about institutions and places, right? And so there's a need to deconstruct a non-accurate sense of reality that a lot of the neighborhoods, some got incentives. You know that here in El Paso, there was incentive if people would remodel their houses, they would receive $60,000 for here, the current place. When I just arrived in El Paso here 10 or 11 years ago, the city hall was giving an incentive people that would remodel their houses in this neighborhood because they wanted to bring it up to the neighborhood, right? So the 1900 cabinet stated that mortgage contract buyers couldn't sell the property to certain people, specifically excluding people of color. What is that? So racial discrimination, right? And it was legal until 40 years ago, but in a hidden way until today. I had this first day here in El Paso as a new professor. I was teaching an undergrad class, and I had a student that read this. And he said, "Oh, professor, now I understand. I applied for housing in a gated community. I was going to buy a house there, and they turned me down. I didn't understand why, because I had all the qualifications. This is a white gated community. They didn't want a Latino that was not in a big upscale job background or had a background." And so he was upset about this, you know. And I'm not going to say more on camera, but there are other examples that this happened. But blockbusting was one of these things that play on white fear, start a rumor that blacks are moving in by saying that black men were raping a white woman to have whites move out and then sell property to blacks or Latinos for a higher price, you know. So people that work in real estate, they knew about how some ethnic groups feel about the others, and they used that to sell. Say, hey, it went to a white community that was dying out, you know, I was running down. And so they said, did you hear? 2 weeks ago, there was a black guy that raped a white girl, and whites have these historical fears about people of color. They want to move out of that neighborhood, right, and sell it. And so a lot of that had been played out. If you think about the first movies, I have documentaries that the first movies that portrayed blacks on TV and what kind of role they play. And usually there was this black guy running after a white virgin girl in the woods. So whites developed this fear. Oh, watch out with the black guys, they're going to rape your daughters. You know, so this historical fear has been built up, and some people know about it, and they play to make a business going. So government backup loans through FHA, Federal Housing Authority, to revive the economy, to change how mortgage was done. But government directions said clearly who would qualify for the loans. Again, excluding blacks, Mexican, or Latinos between the 40s and 60s. Redlining. So the folks that would give these loans, decided by government policies, right? You know FHA loans? You know what is FHA loan?
Yeah.
Federal Housing Authority that gives, well, even if you don't have a down payment, they give you money to buy a house, right? That's where the abuse, that's why we had a major economic crisis start with mortgage, because they start giving loans to people that didn't even have a job. And that's where it broke the whole system, right? But these loans, when in particular, this particular article or chapter was in California, where they would give a map and say, well, and they made a line in the middle. This is where the white folks live, and this is where the blacks and the Latinos were there. They made a red line in the middle, so they would give the loans to the white folks. They say, oh, they are honest people, hardworking people. They're not going to default your loans and stuff. And those others, we don't know. You got to watch out. So that was the idea that motivated folks to do this discrimination, and drawn a map city with a red pencil where blacks and Latinos live. Make sure they would not get the insurance, right? So white got all the loans, moved to the suburbs, and was 95% whites. So here again, I will defend my thesis that force is not coincidence. gave a little cushion, a little push to some people, and kept some people behind. And then a second thesis that I developed in there, you may want to take note of this, that things that happen since slavery benefit whites, disprivileging people of color. And so, 1974 Fair Housing Act passed, influenced the civil rights movement. Policies were revised to make sure it couldn't discriminate, and it reverted the redlining and gave more money to people who had previously excluded by the redlining. But let me ask you this, if people don't pay a mortgage, what happened to you?
Take your house away.
Takes the house away. What else?
Bad
Bad
credit.
credit.
It ruins your credit, right? So people there had their houses already falling apart, and since they couldn't restore their houses, they didn't qualify, and loans were given without down payment, but evidently asked for higher monthly payments. There was a major unemployment. Who were the first folks to lose their jobs? Usually people of color, right? And so a major unemployment in the 70s, evidently blacks were the first one to be unemployed, so consequently, they end up defaulting the loans. What happens when you default the loans? You lose your credit, right? Banks took back property for free. Bank redeveloped by hiring arsonists, because they, I don't know about here in El Paso, but in California, when I lived there 15 years, you had to buy earthquake insurance and fire insurance, right? And so, these guys, they hire somebody to go and burn the houses and then claim, insurances. And so they would get money for the insurance, fire insurance. And they would rebuild the houses and then sell to wealthy whites for a higher price. So you see how government, together with businesses, created situation that really affect the people in a deep way, right? Conclusion. So there is a call here for humbleness from the white folks. White need to know that they didn't get houses out of fair deals and hard work per se only, right? And Jonathan Kozol talk about, how the distribution of housing, the money that comes out of mortgage and so on, benefit better white community or wealthy communities. Depending on where people live, taxes, schooling change. In Los Angeles, poor areas, people receive $3,000, when in wealthy areas, they leave us up to $13,000 per student, right? So that makes a major difference, right? People of color need to feel the good anger and know they are not lazy or less smart, but injustices exist in the world, right? And oppression done to that. Sense of self that come out of place has an imprinted impact on people that needs to be unlearned. People need to know how events came to be before internalizing ideas about each other, right? Say, hey, those people are there, they are lazy, they just work harder, they also will make it. No, here there is quite clear evidence that some people got a boost. Well, Obama couldn't handle either. He gave an incentive recently also. Who got the incentive with Obama? You forgot already. Obama gave incentives, billions of dollars. It was the top 1%. General Electric got it, and some other folks. Even tax break to the wealthiest for 2 years. You heard about that?
Yes.
It's happening in today's world again. Why would he give an incentive to the people that are unemployed, the poorest, right? To say, hey, let's give you a help here too, so you get your business going or something, right? So who worked harder and who cheated, how wealth was constructed, people have wrong ideas about each other. When people say blacks need to get over the tendency to blame white, with their own problems, people needed to understand that in reality, whites continue to have an upper hand over people of color since slavery ended, right? People need to understand why poor areas exist and how it came to be this way. People need to realize how whites got there, and it was not necessarily because they're good people and the others were not, right? There is a need to change ground level and beliefs underneath people of us light skin color. And so those are some of the things that I had in mind to share with you about this.